With the release of Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix, a lot of people were introduced to the site of Gunung Padang for the first time. Since then, there's been a lot of talk about the site's age, and even a paper that came out and since been retracted. There was also a lot of discussion around a stone object that has been nicknamed the Kujang Stone that the team that did the work has identified as an artifact. A while back, someone pointed me towards a video that the Debunking channel had done, which was referencing a video that the Ancient Epoch channel had done. And in the Ancient Epoch video, he performed some type of preliminary lithic analysis based on the photos. And then the Debunking channel takes that preliminary analysis and makes comments about the site and changes ideas or hypotheses about the site based on that preliminary analysis. Now, I've been really busy doing actual archaeology, so I haven't had time to really point out the errors both in the preliminary lithic analysis, but also the errors that just keep happening because people don't even know what they don't know. Anyway, I'm JT, and let's get into some actual archaeology.
To Flint's point that it doesn't look like any stone tool that he's ever seen, I can safely assume he's referring to stone tools like these, that clearly display flaking, to which there's a science and history of evolution.
Okay, so if you're not aware, Flint's dad was also an archaeologist. Flint is actually named after Flint, as in the stuff you make stone tools out of. And then his brother is named Chip. So saying that, oh, you can safely assume that Flint isn't aware of non-chipstone tools, that's like saying, hey, Professor Oak, did you know that there's other tree types like pine? This video is taking me longer to shoot than normal. You want to know why? He keeps wanting pets and then rubbing the camera.
But there are other tools in prehistoric sites that don't display this flaking, such as this tool from a prehistoric site from the Ukraine dating to 1.4 million years ago. Looking at this tool, there is some key similarities to the Kujang Stone, and that is its ergonomic shape.
So he's not classifying the Kujang Stone as a chip stone or a flaked stone tool. The issue is the picture he is showing, it says in it, a person holds a stone flake. So to begin, the archaeologists working on the project aren't even classifying it as a tool. But then on the other side, it's not a groundstone tool. It's not a groundstone object. It's a flake, which is made when you're producing chipped or flaked stone tools. So matching this up with the Kujang Stone after you just classified the Kujang Stone as a non-chipped stone tool is a problem.
Now let's get down to the criteria used to determine the fingerprints of man on an object, as defined by lithic science. I'll apply the same scrutiny upon the Kujang Stone as I did with the Homo naledi stone tool.
To meet the criteria for a forensic archaeologist in determining if a rock is a quote-unquote lithic or a stone tool.
Now, this isn't a big issue, but it's still something that needs to get mentioned. Why would you base what a lithic or a stone tool is based on a forensic archaeologist? Why wouldn't you do the research and figure out what people who specialize in lithics are saying about it? A lithicist. It's rather simple to do. You could read this book, 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 any of these, or these, or these, or any of these. You can't tell, but this baby can fit so many articles and books in it about lithics. Or you could ask an archaeologist. I am actively on Twitter. If you have a question about a rock, I'll answer it. Doesn't matter. If you want to know stuff about lithic analysis, ask an archaeologist. It's rather simple to do. You can write a question in the comments to this video. You can get me on Twitter. Anything, I will answer. And this guy definitely knows my Twitter handle because I've had to make corrections before to his things. So why aren't you reaching out to the resources actively available to you to understand what a stone tool is? But anyway, let's get into the criteria that Ancient Epoch uses to determine that this is a stone tool.
So let's begin. Lithic Criteria 1. Morphology. The artifact is made from stone. It displays an ergonomic shape, allowing for a left-handed hammer grip hold.
Morphology's a bit of a weird one, especially this ergonomic shape description with a hand grip as a kind of classification system. In stone tools, there's a bunch of variation. This is a stone tool. It's a scraper that I made while I was making actually this preform, and this was just a flake that came off, and I decided to turn it into a scraper. And there's no, hand grip, something like that. You can use it like this. This I have it actually scraped on two sides for scraping, like this, and so this classification, this criteria, is a bit of a weird distinction to make to argue the case that the Kujang Stone is an actual stone tool. So, quick clarification. Morphology is an attribute that archaeologists use in determining stone tools or not. It's the categorization within morphology that Ancient Epoch is using that is abnormal or not an average type of categorization that is used. So with that, let's get into criteria 2.
Criteria 2. Topology. Does the artifact compare to any known man-made object on record within a relatively similar time period? And I believe it does with this so-called worked stone from the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, to which I'll provide the link to.
So to begin, I don't believe that Ancient Epoch is meaning topology in this. Topology is the study of stretching, twisting in mathematics, a way to look at that mathematically. I believe what he is trying to say or study is typology. Now, typology is something that is very commonly used in archaeological research, and it is even a way to do relative dating of archaeological occupations or sites and things like that. So we can pull up the Cave Springs projectile point, which is found in Mississippi. We have a area, we have measurements for the data, and then based on the pictures we can see some rather characteristic attributes. One, they all have an expanding stem with a primarily concave base and then strong corner notches. So with that, if we find other points that are within those measurements which have an expanding stem with a concave base, then we can group those into this typology, and then that gives us a rough date for it. So this is definitely something archaeologists use, but let's evaluate how Ancient Epoch compared it to a piece at the Smithsonian.
The Smithsonian artifact displays the same ridgeline along with visible concave cuts. I also would like to add that both of these objects are ground and or polished, hence why there are no visible biface flaking marks.
So Ancient Epoch used two characteristics to assign typology: ridgeline and concave cuts. So this point here, it has corner notches, an expanding stem, and a concave base. Must be a Cave Springs point then, correct? No, this is a Scalorn point, which dates to around 1500 to 800 BP. Now, you may be saying, but wait, ancient epoch made sure that they were in relatively the same time period. So, let's get another example then. So we're going to bring up 2 points here. They're both relatively the same in age. 500-year difference. The Janelle point, which is a San Patrice variety, is 10,000 to 9,500 BP. Looking at the characteristics with no measurements, we see that both are corner notched, both have an expanding stem, both have a concave base, and then, as I mentioned, both relatively the same time period. So this time for sure we have one more characteristic, but they're different typologies. So can you tell me which one is the cave springs in this example? It's difficult to tell the difference, isn't it? Even I'm having trouble differentiating the two based on just the characteristics that I gave y'all with no measurements. In this example here, the one to the right is the Cave Springs example. But let's take a look at the worked stone from the Smithsonian that Ancient Epoch was using as a comparison and classifying within the same typology as the Kujang Stone. So this is where the link provided by Ancient Epoch takes us to. We can see there's 2 pieces of worked stone. In this classification, worked stone means that it was used as some type of tool. We can scroll down and see that there's not much information about it other than it's ground stone, that you've got the excavation dates and the location of the excavations. We can also see, based on these pictures, that maybe you can see some wear on them. It's difficult to see in photos, but the top specimen on the right-hand side, I could see that being some wear, some use wear going on there. But one of the most important things, remember in typology, when we looked at the cave springs, that the measurements were important. Not just the overall, expanding stem with concave base, because there's dozens of those. It has to fit in those measurements. Well, we can see in this here that this piece is only a couple of centimeters. The Kujang stone is much, much larger. So that wouldn't fall into the same typology. That would be completely separate typologies. So comparing it to this piece is inaccurate. It's problematic. And let's move from criteria 2 to criteria 3. And this is the one that I have the most issues with, and I thought it's kind of blaring why, but you watch first and then we'll see if you have the same kind of problems as I do at the end.
Criteria 3, FlintNapping techniques. I'll be honest, the object is rife with them. You can see multiple ridges, multiple bulbs of percussion, multiple bulb angles. Also, in this high-resolution image, you can see what's referred to as fissures. These are key fingerprints of napping a stone. This artifact clearly illustrates plenty of features to be considered man-made. I reject Flint's denial and assertion that because there's nothing else like it, his words, that it's natural. So that completes my analysis of the Kujang Stone artifact.
Did you catch it? Ancient Epoch at the beginning of the video talked about how the Kujang Stone was not a chipstone tool, and he showed many photos of them.
He's referring to stone tools like these that clearly display flaking. I also would like to add that both of these objects are ground and or polished.
But the process of making chipstone tools is called FlintNapping. the process for making a groundstone tool is different. Now, you may see initial flint napping techniques from moving something that's larger down into a smaller size and then grinding and polishing away to get your completed groundstone tool. But the type of things he's looking at on a groundstone tool, or at least what he is saying is a groundstone tool, you wouldn't apply flint napping analysis to that. It looks very different. And see, it kind of grows on that, and I'm going to show you all some cases of actual groundstone analysis that was conducted and what that really looks like. I want to begin by going over some of the ways that groundstone tools are typically analyzed. And I believe Adams 2014 does an excellent job at this, and you can find the link to this paper in the description. As he says, most of the analysis begins with surface analysis. And there's a few things. So first, surface topography. This allows to help identify the potential use of the tool, and then we're looking for signs of use wear or signs of abrasion. This usually goes a long way towards initial analysis of groundstone. Now, in Ancient Epoch's video, he says that the Kujang Stone is actually not a groundstone tool. Instead, it's a talisman.
In the article, do they claim it's a tool? They claim it's an artifact, meaning that it's something that's man-made, which I attempted to prove through my lithic analysis. So if it's not a tool, but it's man-made, what would its purpose be? And I'd like to provide some context to that question. Shamanistic practices have been prevalent in Indonesia for thousands of years up to the modern day. Shamans in Indonesia are referred to as dukun. The dukun are known for healing, medicinal purposes, and even black magic. And within those practices, they use talismans. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Kujang Stone artifact was a talisman at one point.
Now, by this, I'm assuming that Ancient Epoch means that the Kujang Stone is a groundstone object that has no utilitarian purpose, and instead its functions are ceremonial. Now, I've talked about items like this before, the stone mace at Spry, for example. And in those cases, there's still ways to identify that the groundstone was shaped by humans to be used in ceremonies. So let's look at that real quick. Now here's an analysis by Beller et al. Looking at weights. Now, this likely doesn't have the same ceremonial purposes as it, but it also won't have that same grinding or abrasion that you would get from a nutting stone or a pestle or something like that. And what we can see here in this analysis is that there's overlapping manufacturing marks. So that's key when looking at artifacts that may not have the typical use wear of groundstone tools, because they have a more of a ceremonial purpose. They have a non-utilitarian purpose. And we can see in another example of that. Now, this is a grinding stone specimen, so it is a utilitarian object. It is something that had repeated grinding wear done to it, which included abrasion and macroscopically visible grooves. But what's really important with this experiment done by Hayes et al. Is that they reproduced this stone. And so here we can see the shaping of a similar stone, so in this case a sandstone, and the implements of the manufacturing process that it leaves behind. So this is again another example of things that could be done in the analysis of a ceremonial groundstone object. And that's the issue with this. Dr. Natawajajra and his team did not perform any of this analysis. Additionally, there's no microscopic images of the object to show that it was groundstone object, even used for ceremonial purposes. There's no way to identify manufacturing marks. And so the lithic analysis that was conducted by Ancient Epoch can't answer even the questions he has. You need different forms of analysis. Now, one of the things that could be applied is typology. There's actually a good amount of work done on groundstone objects in Indonesia. And so, with that, you can look at the typology of those items and see if they are similar to the Kujang Stone. Now, that won't confirm that is in fact a groundstone object, even used for ceremonies, because analysis still needs to be done. It still needs to find that manufacturing marks, and it still needs to showcase that it was shaped by humans. Now that I've kind of wrapped up this discussion about the issues with the lithic analysis, let's start to talk about what happens when someone takes that inaccurate analysis because they don't know that it's inaccurate and don't ask the experts about it, or at least no longer ask the experts about it.
You may well have seen my video on Gunung Padang, and that was published about a month after Dr. Nadi Wajawa published his paper on Gunung Padang, the paper that's now been retracted, right? And before I made my video, I spent a lot of time asking archaeologists, geoarchaeologists, and geologists to help me dissect and discern the ups and downs of this evidence that was provided in the paper. Now this Kujang Stone, this is something that I fixated on really quickly when I first saw the paper, and it was the first thing that I started asking a lot of academics on Twitter about. Here's what I had to say about it when I made the video. And this Kujang Stone thing, I posted that on Twitter and asked some archaeologists and some geologists about it, and the consensus was overwhelming that that's just a regular old rock. There's no signs of it being shaped by people. It's unique. It's shaped kind of cool, but there's no signs of it being shaped by humans, and it's not the kind of thing that geology could not produce or hasn't produced in the past. But rather than wasting a bunch of time asking academics on Twitter like I did, Eric just dug into supporting information document and applied the standards that are generally used to determine if a tool or a stone is a lithic or not. A lithic being archaeologenese for a stone that was worked by human hands, usually a tool, but oftentimes discarded pieces of a tool, a stone that's been carved on, a stone that was worked by humans.
Now this may be just a small point, but I think it's maybe something that needs to be clarified. Usually the term academic is relegated to people who work in academia. So with this, Dan actually talked to several people who aren't in academia. Now, Dan may think just anyone with a graduate degree is an academic, and that's his own definition, but generally, it's people who work in academia are academics. Now, to shift to the next part, Dan didn't just waste time talking to academics. What he actually did was ask experts what their opinions were based off their experience and their knowledge, what the Kujang Stone is, or what they likely assume it is. And that was amazing. Dan did a fantastic job. I actually want to really compliment Dan. That is a great thing that he did. But since that time, there's been a shift in where the opinions of experts aren't no longer as valued. And when I say experts, I don't just mean academics. I fully believe that people who aren't academics can be experts. I was once on an archaeological survey, and we were doing survey work around an abandoned railroad track that had previously been removed. Now, I had spent some time on the railroad, but I wasn't sure what the items were. The PI, the principal investigator, so the one managing the project, wasn't sure either. My father and grandfather both worked for the railroad, and my grandfather had retired at this point, but had spent 40, 45 years working for the railroad. So I contacted him about the objects that we were finding that we couldn't identify. And guess what? He knew what they were. But that was because he was an expert. He had years of experience working on the railroad, working with these objects to know what they were. So by no means do you have to be an academic to be an expert. But what you do have to have is the experience and knowledge to make what you say credible. You have to be familiar with the topic. And in this case, Ancient Epoch wasn't. He's gotten basic things wrong. Terminology, how the analysis was done, he mixed around the classification of the artifact. And so that's the problem. But let's continue with Dan's discussion.
This artifact clearly illustrates plenty of features to be considered man-made.
This is pretty interesting, even compelling to a degree, because the fact is that everywhere I've seen people cover this, it's been the same crappy images that have been covered, except for a few Indonesian people that Eric himself has posted links to their videos. And I have to point out here that I asked Flint, he's one of the people that I asked about this, and he wasn't aware of the Kujang Stone before I brought it up. And so I may well be responsible because all I knew was that shitty image from the poster. It may well be my fault that Flint is going around saying that all there is a crappy image, because I'm the one that told him all I could find was that. Because I couldn't find that supporting information document that Eric found because I missed it. Again, egg on Dan's face. What do you do?
Now, I just want to add that in addition to Flint, two other archaeologists that I would consider experts on stone tools and lithic production that Dan reached out to during the same times. One would be James Green, who is a CRM archaeologist with a background in stone tool analysis. He also FlintNaps. You can often see him sharing pictures on Twitter of his lithic reproductions, as well as pottery and a whole set of other things. The other would be myself, and I know that sounds kind of braggy, but my day-to-day job is stone tool analysis. That is what I spend my day doing. I have taught the subject. The individual that was really influential in my training as a lithic specialist is actually the author of this book here. And so because of that, it was so well respected when Dan reached out to us about this object, because it showed someone from the alternative history community was willing to listen to the experts, the ones that are probably the most knowledgeable about what this artifact is and if it is an artifact. Now, the conclusion that both James and I agreed on was there were no signs, even on the better photos, that it was a stone tool or even a groundstone object that had been made by humans. And Dan may have forgotten, but he actually did show us a higher resolution picture in determining if we thought it was a tool or not. You can see that right here. And with that, actually, Dan took that information and made a wonderful video about the Kujang Stone and Gunung Padang. I actually really enjoyed his first one. But since that time, there's been a shift. And while people may say things, there's a shift away from the importance of talking to people about these things that are familiar with it, that are experts on it. And when that happens, we keep getting things like this, a spread of misinformation. And I don't think that was Dan's intention, to purposely spread misinformation, but by breaking off that contact with the experts, that is a result, is that there is a continuation of misinformation that went from Ancient Epoch's smaller channel to the debunking channel, which has a much larger audience. And we can see that direct connection of misinformation spreading. But let's kind of wrap up some of the rest of Dan's talking points, and then I'll kind of conclude on this whole Kujang Stone and bad lithic analysis debacle.
But beyond the whole thing there's the Kujang Stone doesn't, it looks like the Kujang dagger, okay? And the Kujang dagger it doesn't show up on the record for way later. And the similarities that they point out, one of the things that the skeptics will point out is that, that this is coincidental. The Kujang dagger has nothing to do with this rock. But I'll let Eric say what he has to think about that.
It is my hypothesis that the Kujang Stone artifact was a talisman used thousands of years ago for purposes unknown to us today.
Now, see, that seems pretty reasonable to me. This shape being like a talisman on this stone, and that shape eventually evolving into a talismanic dagger down the road.
While it's fine to speculate that the Kujang Stone may be a talisman, it's important to remember that there's no evidence for that. And you also have expert opinion, both in archaeologists, and I'm told that archaeologists in Indonesia as well are not seeing any signs that it's a groundstone object. Additionally, there's geologists who are also reporting that it's natural. Now, that's not to crush anyone's archaeological imagination. I think one of the wonderful things about when we look at artifacts is, we think about how it was used. Imagine it being made by those making it, being utilized in some activity. But with this Kujang Stone, the evidence isn't there. It would be very similar to if I just went to an archaeological site that was unexcavated and I picked up a cool looking rock that had no signs that it had been manipulated in any way by humans, instead looking all natural, and I picked it up and said, it's a talisman. There's no evidence for it. It's just me just saying it's speculation. And that becomes a problem when there's bad or false data behind that. So let's wrap up with some of Dan's closing remarks, and then I'll get into mine.
The same point that I made in my first video, we need better and more work done here. We need unbiased archaeologists to go evaluate these artifacts and to not do it just through crappy low-res images and because some dumbass asks them to. They should probably actually evaluate them a little bit better. We should probably send somebody out to do it. We should probably have some of those screen sifters out there. And yes, I still included pictures of the archaeologists that I don't get along with anymore. Just because I find them bad faith actors in the debate sphere, that doesn't mean that I think that they're not good at shaking a screen and pulling an arrowhead out of the dirt. I think they're perfectly good at the things they were trained to do. They should just stay in the fucking lane. Now, basically, Eric offered up something kind of unique here. I mean, despite the fact that it's embarrassing to long-haired electricians on the YouTubes, he found something that a lot of people missed, and it is very, very pertinent data.
Dang. Should stay in our lanes and talk about the things we were trained in. Well, I guess it's a good thing that I was trained in lithic analysis, trained to identify stone tools, also trained to do statistical analysis. So I'm pretty good with data. And I can say that the data gained from ancient epochs lithic analysis is all bad. And Dan is saying that he is rethinking his opinions on Gunung Padang based on that data. So as much as this is for anyone else, it's also for Dan to see the accurate information, see the problems in ancient epochs analysis. one of my main goals with all of this has been just to make sure people have accurate information. That includes Dan, that includes Ancient Epoch. And so because of that, I'll openly talk to both of them. I'll invite both of them to talk about the Kujang Stone with me. Ancient Epoch, he seems to want to know about lithic analysis. I'll be more than happy to answer any of his questions about it. I want to make sure, as he, being someone in this space, knows how to conduct lithic analysis properly. Dan and me both we have a history. We're definitely roller coaster, definitely on the down part of the roller coaster right now. But I'm willing to not discuss any of that with him. Instead, we can focus the discussion primarily on the Kujang Stone. Because what's important to me and what is crucial in all of this, it's not about, haha, I got you, you did something wrong. Everyone does something wrong. What's important is that people that are interested with the passion about the past have accurate information. Because that's vital to both our understanding of the past and also having a clear representation of the people in the past. And so, once again, Ancient Epoch, I think your name's Eric based on Dan's video, and Dan from Debunking. If you want to discuss this, discuss the Kujang Stone, or just things that may help improve to make sure that this spreading of misinformation doesn't happen again, I'll be happy to do so. I'll let our previous discretions against each other fall to the side to talk about this Kujang Stone. So with that, thank y'all. If you have any questions about the Kujang Stone, about lithic analysis, or anything like that, please leave a comment and I will talk about those things. Additionally, if you think there's a different topic y'all would like for me to cover or anything else like that, please let me know. And my next video is actually planned on talking about how lithic specialists, based on the attributes and data we recover, can make decisions and make understandings about what's happening in the past. I think that's going to be a really fun and just exciting video, and I think once y'all have that information, it's almost not necessary for me to critique bad lithic analysis because you'll be more familiar with it. So thank you, and it's been really fun. I really appreciate y'all watching throughout the whole video, and until next time.